Coming down this bizarre river that had taken me thus far, I had a time to chat with Heinrich, perhaps less chatting with and more speaking towards. He lacked the requisite anatomy to respond to my inquiries with any answer, but I did find speaking to him more comfortable than being lost in my own thoughts. I decided to regale him with the events that he had missed. You should have seen them. Well, you did see them, and they shot you in the gut with an arrow, but you should have seen them. It will be difficult to adjust to Donna, despite her own creative streak in the bedchamber.
Glub.
Yes, I'm not sure what their purpose was either, considering the obvious, as they lack male companions among them perhaps. That sort of thing is a tax they levy on sudden visitors. Unless they spring from the ground spontaneously, that must be the truth, surely.
Blub.
The water began to do most of the work for Heinrich as we moved away from the mangroves and towards a large lake. It took the better part of 3 days, each of us trading positions between amidships and the stern. Now that I could row, I would. This offered me an opportunity to utilize what had been lost to me for the better part of 3 decades. There was a relief in knowing that the improvement remained with me each morning that I woke up. As we moved over this lake, we would moor the craft on the shore, distribute the bread with its delicious filling, and bed down for the night. Heinrich had a habit of lurking off into the waters near the shore, just before I slept. It was my hope that it was an effort to protect me from whatever horrific creature that might crawl from the depths. But I'm sure that it was simply his preference, rather than to sleep amidst the moist sands of the beach. Eventually, the fires and lights of a settlement could be seen as we trekked along the sides of this enormous lake, filled across the top with green algae. While it had been some time since I had gone away from my people, I did not think at the time that my journey out of the deepest of these worlds had taken longer than 2 weeks. Had I a glass, I would have reconnoitered the perimeter of the settlement that we approached, to ensure that they were in fact men of a nation that I would recognize. The clunking of steam engines indicated to me that they would be familiar. We sat across from the settlement on the banks of a shallow river. I considered the options. Should we approach and be found to be unrecognizable as royalty of a great power, there might be consequences that I could not foresee. If I was recognized, then there could be at least some rapprochement with the local authorities, and I might finally be able to return to the men. The corps of gulls above us filled our ears. I turned to Heinrich, whose body glistened in the heat of the midday light.
Blub.
Then you and I are of one mind. I resolved to take his response as a yes and proceed forward. We crossed the river, drawing a sandy trail through the waters and up onto the opposite shore. Less than a kilometer away, the gates of the settlement stood proud. I should have taken notice of the fires at this distance. They broiled with a warmth that we could feel, even at this distance. I should have known. We approached, and at first impression, the guards appeared French. Caps, red trousers, green jackets rather than the blue, but our intelligence. Dossiers indicated that the color of their uniforms varied between units. Strange compulsion, given the general movement towards concealing colors in modern military science. They waved us down at a distance of 100 meters, and I raised my arms to indicate that I was unarmed. Heinrich mirrored my movement. They certainly weren't French, judging by their language. Italians. I had hoped they were Spanish, but they were Italian. Of all the madness I had seen on this journey, this would be the worst. It became clear that the language barrier would be insurmountable. I tried French and English with the two of them, but it proved insufficient. They didn't shoulder arms towards us, but instead bid us enter the settlement under escort. It was a strange place. It was a horrible place. I will admit that the Italians and the French have a penchant for pretty architecture. It is strange seeing that blend of Romanesque and Renaissance architecture, all those domes and gilt-edged columns, defiled in the name of their new heathen faith. Naturally, the flame featured prominently in their artwork. Aside from that, the townsfolk were quiet. Being of a Mediterranean disposition, even in this underworld, did not prevent them from taking a break from work and obligations during the heat of the day. Ironic, considering their newfound appreciation for heat. On occasion, a wooden shutter of a window or the creak of a door signaled that we were being watched. Crackling bronze braziers lining the streets burned with a fierce heat that compelled me to sweat profusely. Heinrich began to struggle as we made our way to the palazzo, where their governing authority must reside. I took his bulbous amphibian shoulder and helped him along. Above the roaring of those braziers, an occasional scream, man, woman, or child, could be heard. I remembered snooping in on a discussion of their practices during my tenure at the academy, how they made their own access to this bizarre place through ritualistic sacrifice of non-believers. Several paddle ships came and went from the waterside, where boardwalks were filled, with the requisite imported materials for the furtherance of their construction. As I understood it, they had been here for some years. A sizzling aroma of burned flesh could be sniffed above the scent of a growing city. Scorched hair, melted teeth. They must have been proceeding with the offerings to their gods. I am no Catholic. In fact, my Lutheran faith promotes a disdain for them, their near idolatry and corruption that brought the whole of Europe to blows for a century after Luther's death. But even they didn't deserve to be replaced by an abomination of this nature. They hide it well. Not like the Turks or the Russians, whose brutality can be put on display for all to see, cowing their unruly subjects by confronting them with the cost of transgressions. Eventually, Heinrich and I had to be separated. Before us was this tremendous building, all the crenellations and decorative embellishment of the Doge's palace in Venice, but in the alcoves, where images of the apostles or other saints might reside, containers of molten rock burned bright. It was suffocating, this heat. It was worse for Heinrich. To my gratitude, the guard that had taken him away from me proceeded towards a fountain near the side of the building. Hopefully he would be allowed to moisten himself. It became clear that they had some knowledge of who I was. Once inside the building, doors opened on their own, and eventually the man who had walked me through this Romanesque inferno disappeared from my side. A great door of ebony wood, as one would find in a chapel, with silvered handles. I attempted to grasp hold of them to open the door, but despite giving no indication of the temperature, I cursed aloud as the metal burned my hand. The door began to withdraw away from me, and within I assumed sat the authority, a short man, balding, with a ring of sparse hair around the top of his head. He wore a suit and vest. It seems their religious upheavals did not also prompt a change in their dress. He looked up towards me through a thick set of glasses. One of the doormen, his shako strapped tight under his chin, approached the broad, dark wood desk and whispered something into the seated man's ear. Promptly the guard shuffled away and took hold of those doors by the silvered handles without flinching and closed it behind me.
How can the governorate of Sicilia Terza help you, sir?
He knew I was German. He spoke it well enough. How does one respond to this kind of inquiry? I have no identification. My Merite had been lost when I suffered that sudden transportation weeks ago. He knew more than he let on. I've begun to hate that sort of person. Speak your mind openly. Why withhold when you can communicate openly? No. Why not play his game? I have grown used to it. Let us roll the dice. You know me to be German. My companion and I became lost during an expedition. I seek safe passage to our holdings in the layer above, or to the surface, whichever is more expeditious.
You take strange company.
God help me. If one more person points Heinrich out as some mindless animal, I'll have him drawn and quartered. He acted as a guide through the mangrove tributaries around this lake. We were searching for large game when we became separated from our hunting party.
What were you hunting, Mr.
William.
What were you hunting in the mangroves?
Arthropleura. Nasty things.
Arthropleura?
Arthropleura. Those tremendous millipedes that nest in the jungles.
We are aware of them. Who were you hunting with?
Friends. I come from the Wittelsbach line. My father took an expeditionary commission during the Untersiedlung.
What were you using to hunt the Arthropleura?
Sauer and Sohn 4-bore stopping rifle. He looked up at me and gestured behind me. I hadn't noticed a chair in front of the desk when I entered the room. Perhaps the heat of this place had begun to broil my mind as well as my body. His questioning continued as I took the seat.
You came from your people's settlement then?
I struggled to recall the name of our parallel colonization effort on this layer, but that sounded correct. I knew nothing of the conditions, nor its governors. I began to hope that this questioning would shift in subject. Indeed, we set off from the lower parts of the city.
Through the mines or through the timber yards to the south?
The mines, naturally. The creatures tend to burrow to find shelter. Rousting them out is easy when you are aware of their habits. A bushy eyebrow rose up from behind the silvered rim of his spectacles. I hadn't noticed his scribbling in a leather-bound tome and dipping his pen in a brass inkwell. The writing stopped.
Wilhelm, I should say. Wilhelm von Wittelsbach? I'm afraid that I can see through the shroud that you cast over the truth. There are troubling inconsistencies you present. I know you to be Wilhelm of Hohenzollern. I know that you have not come from your people's settlement here on this layer, as there are no mining operations there. I know that you did not become lost during a safari, as there are no Arthroplura present on this layer.
The heat began to raise my blood. I lashed out. What do you know of it? Who then are you to tell me what I have seen and done? I am a free man, and a citizen of a power greater than your own heathen shit heap. I demand to be returned to my people, or so help me God, my grandfather will have the whole Imperial army billeted in Ravenna by week's end.
Your grandfather must be a powerful man.
The game is up. My own temper betrayed me. It was not the first time. I know that it will not be the last. I am the Crown Prince Wilhelm of Hohenzollern, heir to the German imperial throne. You will grant me safe passage to my people. That is the end of this discussion. I will not be intimidated or interrogated by some pagan bureaucrat.
Indeed I will. Grant you safe passage, I mean.
The tone changed. Bizarre. He rose and leaned over the desk, extending a hand to shake.
I hadn't introduced myself. Commendatore Bertoragoni, Sicilia Terza's governor.
I was reluctant to accept that hand. I did, in a hope that this interaction would come to an end. I would say that I am charmed, but I am not.
Understandable. We don't mean to take a tone with His Highness. We just needed to know you were who the papers believed you to be.
The papers! He pulled open a drawer on the left side and retrieved a bundled yellowed newsprint and handed it to me. My picture. The Italian was not decipherable, but the question mark at the end of the headline made the message obvious. They had at least taken notice of my absence, which was something of a reassurance. The date on the paper made me pause. In fact, my breath left my lungs without being followed by inhalation. August 19th, 1886. That's nonsense. I've been gone for 2 weeks, not 2 years.
I'm happy to prove that fact, if His Highness would like.
2 years? 2 years? Jesus Christ. They will have thought me dead. They will have moved on. Donor, little William, Eitel, father, grandfather. What will they think? What have they done to give effect to a rescue? What actions have been taken in my absence? Disinheritance? Divorce in absence? You stated that you would return me to my people, make good on your promise, send a telegram to my people, tell them that you have made contact. I have full confidence they will compensate you handsomely.
I have complete confidence that they will, but my government is less concerned with what they might offer us, and more concerned with what you might offer.
I've yet to take my throne. I may no longer be eligible for the crown. They likely believe me to be dead. I can give you nothing at this moment.
Not at this moment, in a future moment.
The objective of his game now becomes clear. He knows that the search for me has continued all this time. He knows that my people are still in power. Father, in all likelihood, despite his illnesses, has likely taken the throne. Our agreement with the Volcanists must have survived during my absence. They wouldn't entertain such a discussion otherwise. Now the Commendatore had the upper hand. Should I refuse, I may disappear entirely, likely hurled into one of their furnaces fueled by the flesh of men. Should I accept, I become indebted to them for returning me to my people. If I agree to his terms and later refuse, our dynasty's word becomes filled with doubt. What choice do we have? What choice do I have? What would you have then, Commendator?
Nothing. You will be returned to your people. We will call upon you later, Your Highness. Our government would be most appreciative that you keep our kindness in mind.
This fire-worshipping scum now holds a pretense of politeness. I should accept, and then watch our army pour through Austrian Tyrol and reduce every last pagan shrine and heathen desecration to rubble. Not yet. I cannot move forward while the enemy has the upper hand. On its face, our historical combined efforts against the Habsburgs was a practical decision. Hegemony over Germany needed to pass to us to effectuate the unification of our people. It was an ugly compromise and not without diplomatic repercussions. Very well then, you have my word. Call upon me in proper fashion and your government will have what you ask.
I appreciate His Majesty's kindness.
No contract, no signing through the lower line, no guarantee that I will not go back on my word once I leave.
Would His Majesty prefer to return to Berlin or to the city of his namesake?
City of my namesake?
Wilhelmstadt, on the layer above. Your efforts at colonization have proceeded unimpeded as we understand it.
To hear the fortress grew into a city, that city must be prospering, if not subject to the continued attacks from Sintra's people. Sintra.
Let go.
I felt my tear duct produce something, but it dried before I felt it run down my cheek. Such was the heat present in the room. Berlin.
As His Majesty desires.
A closed carriage, a telegram, that was all that it required. Thankfully, I did not need to travel very far, or for very long. Heinrich would be taken, under escort, to Wilhelmstadt, where our men would take him into custody. We would proceed through Stromboli. I will not describe the horrors that I saw there. Reader, hear me. If you proceed below, seek all possible alternatives to your descent. Do not accept offers from the men of the Italian peninsula. The molten rock that envelops you as you ascend from that lower level whispers blasphemies in your ears. I have had enough whisperings for the entirety of my lifetime. Whatever arrangement grandfather made with the Vulcanist government, or whatever pressure he exerted on them, it must have been substantial. Every guard formation in the army descended the peninsula via train. Trains that, as I had understood during my very first briefing with Moltke, were constructed by Krupp. At least then, I had some confidence that there would be no derailment. I had been told that father and grandfather would await me at the palace. There were a number of clarifications given to me by the Oberst of the 1st Regiment of Foot Guards that greeted me. I could swear that he was an old friend from the academy, but I could not place his name on his face. Donia had not divorced me in my absence. The children had not forgotten me. I had not been disinherited. They were told by Moltke and Tirpitz that I had disappeared after chasing a primitive away from the camp. Somewhat accurate. Their discretion with not revealing my relation to that primitive would be rewarded when I returned properly. If I returned properly. The train from Verona to Berlin was quiet. There was some commotion at the coaling stop in the Tyrol. The Habsburg Emperor sent some manner of congratulations by requesting some of the local dignitaries to board the train bearing gifts. It would have been rude to refuse them. The kitchen staff will have to find a use for the innumerable wheels of cheese. The commendatore did not lie to me, despite my initial beliefs. 2 years had passed since I found myself in that deepest hell. 2 years since I had let our men sack a city. 2 years since Sintra slipped from my grasp. 2 years since the Acadian assured me of all of those things that would continue to haunt me while I slept. Even now, I hear his voice in my sleep, among others. My hatred of crowds hadn't disappeared since I disappeared. When we debuted in Berlin, there were thousands of them, waving pictures of myself, the rest of the royal house, cheering, greeting, giving thanks that their royal scion had returned to them. I did the polite thing, waved back, shook the hands of the legislators that got closest to the platform. All the while, my singular concern was to get away and to reunite with my family. My people had seen me. I had done my duty. The palace had not changed very much. Naturally, the gardeners had done their work as summer had begun to turn to autumn, but there were no new additions. That terrible little electric tram still had its tracks dug into the street just outside. The crowds began to thin as we approached. Our palace sentries tended to keep them away from the gate, at the family's request. We didn't begrudge the people a harmless curiosity in their leadership, but we are still private people with private lives. All while we journeyed, no one had made mention of my restoration. I had begun to take cups of coffee, hoist luggage, read newspapers, all with both hands. I caught the Oberst looking a bit shocked one morning on the train leaving the Tyrol, but he quickly averted his gaze when I caught him staring. There would be some confusion about it, I'm sure. If I could explain the phenomenon with the sciences at hand, I would, but I knew that I couldn't. My soldier's escort now left me, and the wrought iron gate closed behind me. There they stood, my family. I could see the tears from Donia and Mother reflecting the morning sun. Donna had attempted to keep the children in check, but when I came around the corner from the hedges near the gate, she lost a grip on them, and little Wilhelm and Eitel, now growing boys, ran up towards me and greeted me. This time, I couldn't hold the tears in. I let them come. I knelt and embraced them both. Wilhelm could reach just over my shoulder, but Eitel was still a bit too short. I took them in my arms, and I vowed to not let go. I wouldn't leave again. I vowed to not let go. I would not let go. I would not lose them. I released them, and they ran back to Donia. I continued my approach, and I could hear the staff struggling with my luggage, just as they did on the day that I left. I had to engage in a bit of shopping in Innsbruck, given that I'd been discovered without any of my effects. Perhaps I overdid it. Donia next. Before I crossed the threshold of the steps, she picked up her skirts and jumped into my arms. Out of instinct, I gave her that single-armed embrace that I had done for so many years during my courting of her. I suppose it would be a good time for a little surprise. Our lips met, and we shared a kiss. I opened my eyes and ran my left hand up the length of her back. Her eyes opened with a shock, and she attempted to pull away, but I would not let her go. Not yet. She hadn't expected that, I'm sure.
My love, how?
We'll speak of it inside. Allow me to finish my greetings. She understood, but the tears and the sniffles continued. Mother, father, and grandfather remained. Mother was looking better than father, who must have been subjected to more English torture. A scar ran up the length of his neck. Grandfather wobbled on his cane. He appeared just as he had during our last discussion in the garden. A bit more wrinkled in places, but largely the same. Mother first. She grasped me tightly. She must have noticed my little left-handed trick with Donia and grabbed at my previously defunct arm, ensuring that I hadn't required a sudden prosthesis during my tenure below. When she found muscle, I felt her breath out. Despite her beliefs in the English medicines that are slowly killing father, I was still glad to see her. Father next. I wasn't sure if he was medicated prior to appearing at the threshold, but in a strange bit of theatre, he stuck out his right hand for me to shake. Another opportunity to demonstrate the miracle that befell me. I met it with my left. He then brought me in close. I could tell he was straining to do such a thing, and that it likely took significant preparation to heave himself out of bed for the task of greeting me. I appreciated his effort, but I declined to embrace and squeeze what air remained in his lungs. Finally, grandfather. Thank God he had not passed in my absence. Thank God he was here. His stoop evaporated as I approached. Just as with father, his relief my return must have compelled him to demonstrate what remaining strength he had. I could have sworn I heard a sob beneath his beard, which had grown sizable.
It is good to have you back, my boy.
Indeed, grandfather. I am glad I finally received an opportunity to regale you with the tales of the world beneath. He returned to his stoop, and the staff opened the doors for us to make way towards the parlor. While we maneuvered through the doors and inside, I caught in my sights that fellow who handed me that faux pas of a drawing that allowed me to escape from the insufferable Hungarian. I reached into my tunic and retrieved a pouch of gold marks. I handed it to him and pushed him off down the hall. It was not apparent that he remembered what I was compensating him for. I was satisfied that I knew he deserved it. The parlor was equipped for a proper homecoming. I took coffee, per my individual habits, and sat with Donna first. We took to the chaise in the center of the room, while the others had the staff pour beverages and prepare tea cakes, and it took all her self-control not to throw herself on top of me with father and mother, and grandfather still present. She could not keep herself from touching my restored arm. Were it not an indignity, I would have removed my shirt and had her feel beneath. We would have that opportunity soon enough. For the moment, I'm sure there would be inquiries that I needed to address. She began the barrage as soon as I put down my cup.
My love, my strong warrior, how did you fare amidst the unknown? How did you come into the company of the Italians?
How to respond to such a broad inquiry, given all that I had seen? It was an odyssey for certain. I had the luck to be accompanied by a wizened guide. It was he that I credit with my survival.
What is his name? Where does he reside? We shall shower him with gifts. Did he ask for compensation?
Akamnandak. He resides deep in that underworld. He did not ask for compensation. He and I came to an accord, and he escorted me to safety.
A strange name. An Oriental, perhaps?
I remain unsure. He is a good man. It would be difficult to reach him, my love. Be satisfied in knowing that I was able to come back to you, at least in part, because of him. She took some measure of relief in this, that I had been helped. Her curiosity regarding my rejuvenated arm now took over her. Father, mother, and grandfather had taken their seats in those overstuffed chairs and brought a keen ear against our conversation. Against my better judgment, I answered honestly. It was a miracle. Below exist wonders that our myths and legends record, but were never accorded scientific truth. I found my way there, on that same layer where I made contact with the volcanists after my guide left my company. I can't tell her about the warrior women. I couldn't tell her about Sintra. Some things will remain between you and I, dear reader.
But how? What was it that restored you? Some medical practice taken up by the primitives?
A font of life, quite literally. It was as though God himself brought me before it, as a belief that I would be lost down in that place forever when my guide left me.
How does it feel to be whole?
An image of my huntress-captor flashed before me in my mind. It feels inexplicable. All those things that were troublesome or impossible now no longer trouble me. My staff have asked me to seek a physician to examine the developments, but I insisted that I rest and spend time with all of you first before being poked and prodded unnecessarily. She took off her white glove and grabbed at my left hand, giving a squeeze. I squeezed back, and our eyes met as smiles opened across our faces.
Did you fear the danger when you took the fight to the natives before your disappearance?
Moltke is a premier planner of military affairs. I did not fear for the sufficiency of his designs. I feared for the men, facing the unknown. So little is understood in that strange place. There is so much to learn, and too few men willing to partake in that knowledge. I watched as that impossibly ancient city was sacked and razed. I watched the Yazatan women dragged out by their hair towards defilement. I watched as our men burned and looted their homes like ravenous hyenas. I turned the tables on the discussion. On that matter, how have Moltke, Tirpitz, and Diesel fared? Do they remain below, or have they returned to their lives here above? Grandfather spoke now. I owe him an explanation, given all that I had done down there in his name, all the good and all the evil.
Turn, my boy, and see for yourself.
And there they were, comrades in arms, and one in a laboratory coat. They all looked on with relief that the bulletins and briefings were true. I had returned without incident. Not without incident, I should say. Without loss. But there was a loss. I lost her to that cliff. I lost her to those dark waters. The parlor began to fill with chatter of the multitudinous mouths and the clatter of multitudinous plates. I appreciate the sentiment that brought them all here. It is a good feeling to know that you have not been forgotten. The room began to fill, to the extent that buffets from the ballroom had to be moved into the hallway as more dignitaries and critical individuals began to make their way to the palace. I had thought that the first day ought to be singularly devoted to my reunification with the family, but a spontaneous party evolved anyway. The story that I had not been a part of slowly began to be told as I maneuvered. Around the room, each man and woman present thankful for my safe return. Moltke and Tirpitz put the settlement on lockdown within 6 hours of my departure. The entirety of 5th Corps was roused from their Sunday rest and swept the camp, searching for me and my primitive accompaniment. When no sign of my presence was found, they sent a telegram to Berlin to request further reinforcement and report my disappearance. Bismarck and grandfather got to the point of signing the orders for mobilization of our reserves and the deployment of all assets through to Paris, but without Moltke overseeing that deployment of millions, it was deemed a logistical impossibility. Instead, Tirpitz took the fore and liaised with English authorities in Iceland to permit the deployment of most of our surface fleet to assist in the search. One new division arrived every 2 weeks to Wilhelmstadt and our settlement on the 4th. 2 new ships descended the Icelandic canals on the same timetable. They, alongside our ground forces, searched every jungle, every desert dune, every tidal cove on that layer for me. There were casualties that resulted. After 6 months and there was no sign, they began to consider other options. All the while, the family did not give up hope, although arrangements were made. In the event that the passing of the crown would need to be made without me, unsurprising, grandfather demanded that all private concern with interests in the layers as far as the 5th began a clandestine search. Posting of materials, distributing descriptions, paying off the authorities when needed and avoiding them when not. Private and public services requisitioned for a continuation of the search. They continued these efforts for the last year, before realizations that the possibility that I might not return began to overcome the emotional impulse to find me. Understandable, I suppose. I was unsure whether or not to explain to them the strange discrepancy in time that I suffered as the Acadian, Heinrich, and I journeyed from the deepest depths. I found it best to not be forthcoming with such information. If asked, I could describe it with the accuracy that my limited understanding afforded me, but I could not explain it fully. It became clear that I needed some time alone with Donna. The staff escorted the children away, and she and I made our way to our chambers. Her screaming did not threaten to disturb anyone this morning, thankfully. My restored left arm now gave me the opportunity for new possibilities. It became obvious that this would be a new delight for her. I delighted her for nearly an hour, before the halls outside began to grow quiet as our sudden guests began to depart the palace. From behind a ruffle of her mussed blonde hair, she presented a statement.
I have been waiting for that for far too long, my love.
I took her hand in mine and assured her that I would make good on the promise I made when she visited me below. A month in Wiesbaden, no duties, no children, no concerns, only she and I, and we would sweat and scream and pamper ourselves without interruption. A knock at the door was repulsed, but it became clear that I should rise and give acknowledgement to whomever it was that demanded my attention. Before I could dress properly, a set of papers slipped under the door, and I could hear the wooden soles of a man's shoes clack against the tiled floor and walk away from the entrance. Stooping down to retrieve the sudden and uninvited correspondence, my eyes caressed the materials. A sinking of my heart now overtook me. Physicians' reports, written in English. Skimming the documents at least indicated that they didn't pertain to me. They pertained to father. Laryngeal tumors. Treatment generally unsuccessful. They gave him less than a year. I sat on the bench at the foot of the bed. Donia brought herself away from the ripped sheets and laid her head on my shoulder. She said something to me that I couldn't pass. It was inevitable, truly. We knew the prognosis for father's ailment would never be long. Those attending to him always insisted that there was yet another drop, another procedure, another method to try before they truly gave him up to destiny. 2 years of attempts since I had been gone, 2 years of failure. I hoped that I would be away when news of this nature would find me. I could have my breakdown alone, and not under the scrutiny of the rest of the family. I would not be afforded that grace. I threw the papers on the bench and began to dress properly.
Is there something wrong, my dear?
Yes, naturally. Sovereign authority does not wait for a man to journey out of the underworld. The earth continues to turn, whether or not he is there to take his place in it. I now knew the extent of our people's response to my disappearance. For their colossal efforts, I shall remain a grateful and faithful servant. I will not allow my absence to create problems. My return to duty must now take place. Nothing, my dear. I should liaise with some of my fellows. I shall return shortly. I felt a hand run up my back.
Come and give me life again, love friend.
With a start, I turned, and that bronze skin and black hair and blue eyes sent a shiver through me. Cherries. The seductive look and the coy bend in her knees as she laid on the bed. No, no, no. I closed my eyes and shook my head. Donna, it's just Donna. She began to give me a concerned look. She had been there. Just there. I heard her.
Are you well, William?
Yes, my love. Just a bit tired. Now dressed, I departed her company to go and find our telegraphist, still passing through the plate of finger foods that had been distributed, even to the staff, generously. I started rattling off the critical persons that needed to be summoned to brief me. Moltke, naturally. An understanding as to how Fifth Corps had fared during my absence was of the utmost importance. Tirpitz, given that it was his responsibility to ensure supplies reached the colony, and that his command must have grown substantially as we committed more and more naval assets to the search for me. Diesel, to determine the extent to which any of the materials that we had been examining before I went on that strange odyssey, and if anything had been produced that needed royal approval before introducing it to the boardrooms and design bureaus in Berlin. Let's start with them. I can address the others later. Perhaps I should just drink in my office, settle the nerves. It couldn't be that feigned deep drunkenness. Even the fire-worshipping heathens that the Italians have become knew to pace the ascent on their Stromboli conveyor. Striding towards my office indicated that the staff was still largely squaring away the parlor after the departure of our sudden guests. Quiet halls in the palace. I suppose that there is a first time for everything. Finding the door to my old office, I found everything just as I had left it. In all likelihood, the family nor the staff could not bring themselves to enter. Judging by the layer of dust that had accumulated on all of the surfaces therein, my hypothesis was likely correct. I rummaged through the drawers of my desk. Just as I had left it, that bottle of brandy I had kept in the bottom left was still there. I retrieved it, and the glasses I had a habit of keeping, and poured. Drawing a match across the striker on my case, there was some relief to be found. In a pack of Batschkaris that were picked up before the Oberst met me in Ravenna, I poured and I pondered. Akamnandag did mention that I would see her again. I did not want to trust his word, but I could not prove anything that he had told me during my journey to be a lie. I picked up the glass and downed the entirety, slamming it back down against the mahogany as I began to pour again. I had been sober. I hadn't a need for morphine or other intoxicants until just now. I knew what I saw was not real. I knew what was real, just my imagination, my tiredness warping my perceptions, nothing more. Let us address Father's condition tomorrow. She and Father are already likely in their chambers or in the library. I would hate to disturb them. Back to the telegraphist. I had him book Donya and I a chalet in Wiesbaden. We will leave tomorrow. As required, correspondence with the critical figures can take place remotely. Nothing needed to be done on the very day of my return. I have time. I have her. I returned to Donya. I began addressing her as I opened the door. The arrangements are made. We shall depart by train tomorrow evening. The staff will mind the children. I hadn't looked up to see if she was listening. She had taken up the dossier that was slipped under our door, reddening eyes. Trickles of moisture from her eyes down to her ample bosom. I knew her hatred of Mother would not prevent her from grieving my father. I can only imagine what she was like while I was gone, under the belief that she needed to grieve for me. She tended towards the outbursts of emotion more than most women I had known. It was something I liked about her. She never withheld anything from me. I sat with her and took the papers from her hands. Taking hold of her, it was difficult to provide comfort, but an attempt was made. We shall resolve that matter when we return. If something should happen while we are away, it will be because God intends it so. My father's condition and its severity have been known to us for some time. It is no surprise. I will grieve when it is appropriate. For now, we must stay strong. Take solace that your loving husband has returned safe and sound from his debacle. Stay strong for our children, who will need you, should I ever be called away again." She nodded and brought her face in close to mine, lips and tongues intertwined. We resumed just where we had adjourned. I feared that, by morning, there would be nothing left of the sheets. I would have to buy her something nice to level out her emotional incontinence. Perhaps a new parfum? I wonder if Debray makes one scented of cherries. We departed the next evening. The telegraphist insisted that he had sent out my messages to the fine gentleman as requested, but no response had been given, even just an hour before we were due to board the carriage towards the station. Again, I felt the pain that the servants must have felt as they loaded my 3 bags and Donia's 12 into the 2 carriages. We weren't traveling separately, but my love had a habit of traveling heavily. In fairness, we would be gone for the better part of a month. I recalled our honeymoon as we sat there, still teenagers, effectively. Royal propriety was all that kept us from tearing away our clothes and rutting like animals in the carriage. Also, the fact that the station was only minutes away. I prefer to take my time in intimate matters. Makes for a better resolution for both parties, in my experience. From what I had heard about the chalet we had booked, its isolation would be sufficient to permit us all manner of loud debauchery. Perhaps more importantly, it gave Donna and I a time to reconnect. By necessity, it was a private car down to the Western Line and southwards towards Hesse, just as well appointed as they ever were. I declined the champagne and went for a brandy. I needn't have left our cabin, but I felt that it would be a necessary tonic to my psychological scare from the other evening. She and I had an early luncheon and discussed developments that had transpired since my absence. There was something she was burning to tell me. I could tell by the way she dropped her spoon into the pudding without taking a bite.
You've certainly taken to being away for so long quite well. You have been insatiable, my dear.
Every day down there, I burned for you. I have 2 years of love left to give. It is a pity we are only away for a month.
Did you ever?
Her voice trailed for a moment, and then she found it again.
Satiate your appetites with another?
My throat closed while I took in my brandy, and was compelled to cough, indicating my guilt. Another question which the fate of our dynasty hung. I almost preferred the commendatore's interrogation. Here, I cared for the subject's opinion of me. I loved Donia. I loved Sintra. To betray my fidelity was a deadly sin. Even worse, I loved the subject of my infidelity. Love is a common subject of modern writings, but so few can put the sentiment into proper words. What love I have for Donia is a love of who she is. It is the love of building a legacy. It is a love that we share between us, and the love that extends outwards, towards our children. It is a durable thing. What I had with Sintra was different. A fiery passion, the exotic temptation, her alien nature brought out the impulse in me. Perhaps that was shared by those Spaniards that stayed in the Yucatan after the conquest. With each temptation, the possibility of unlocking new, undiscovered secrets. With each kiss, a marked notch of progress towards civilization. Our passions compelled us to meet in the middle. Her savagery and my high culture blended in our intimacy. I let go of her hand. I did not let go of her heart. She did not let go of mine. Never, my dear.
I would understand if you did. So many officers take lovers while on campaign. It is not unheard of. You are a man of high virility and potency. It must have been difficult to manage your impulses in that new world.
Never. My dreams of you and following emissions resulted in more than one difficult stain. For the laundresses, but it was a sacrifice that I knew had to be made. She blushed at the salaciousness of my response.
No matter then, my love. I just seem to recall that primitive woman that intruded on us the day of my departure. She looked as though she knew you.
I investigated the matter afterwards. One of the artillerymen had picked her up in the English settlement that we had passed, tagged along as a camp follower before departing back to her people, as I understood it.
Liar.
Thanks be to God, her inquiries pressed on towards other matters.
Your man Moltke was not the first to suggest that you had died. In fact, it was Commander Tirpitz.
In honesty, my dear, I am surprised that the suggestion did not grace your ears earlier than 1 year into my absence.
He seemed insistent that he had a source that confirmed your passing, but would not say who it was. We did not press him when he arrived at the palace for the daily briefs that your grandfather demanded, and it hadn't occurred to me to inquire about it until just now.
I believe he has been consulting with a clairvoyant. She appeared surprised at this, and a bit more engaged now. The trifle that was before us began to slowly disappear, spoonful by spoonful.
I would have pegged him for a follower of astrology, sailors and their superstitions being what they are.
What I yearned to tell her could never be repeated. Perhaps he does that as well. If anything, my return should indicate to you that perhaps placing stock in the sayings of supposed psychics does not always render the truth.
As you say, my love.
With the trifle disposed of, the staff were good enough to bring a port. I never cared for the fortified wine, but Donna enjoyed it, and it always made her a bit more pliable. I pivoted the conversation once again, as that brilliant ruby liquid filled our glasses. What do the children know? I don't wish to scare them again. This seemed to darken her spirit, but she gave me an honest answer, insofar as I could tell.
Very little. They did not intrude on the family's discussions with the colonial and military authorities. Itel will occasionally wander the palace, but little Wilhelm does not tend to stray far from the nannies. I don't believe they overheard anything that would complicate matters. I informed them that you were away for work, and would return when the work was finished. There was no sense in complicating matters.
She is a better parent than I. Donna always had the right instincts as far as the children were concerned. Will Wilhelm begin schooling next year? He is getting quite big.
I'm tempted to impress the services of a tutor for the first few years. The school system seemed to be more interested in the distribution of socialist madness and godless heathenry than a proper education.
Then, by all means, go forward in that fashion. I would like to interview them before you pick one.
As you say, Prince.
I looked up again, wide-eyed, to see if I was suffering another momentary loss of reality. Instead, Donna was just cracking a wry smile. Far be it from her normal behavior to address me by my title, at least when we were alone. The port was beginning to sink into both of us. I retrieved a cigarette, and her mood soured.
Another habit from beneath the earth?
Yes, a bad one.
I'm glad you know it to be unhealthy, my love.
A necessary solution for the unraveling nerves of a future sovereign.
Those things will kill you. They have likely already killed your father.
I looked up from her, somewhat shocked. She recoiled. She knew that father's health was a regular concern of mine. She knew that I knew his penchant for cigars was what killed him. It was never properly proven by scientific evidence, but the correlation between the habit and the disease was difficult to argue against.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
It's all right, my love. I know that you want the best for me. I wish I did. She rose from the table and sat herself in my lap. Just like Sintra used to, stop it. Given the general rattling of the wheels of our private car and the separation we enjoyed from the remaining passengers on board the train, there was no embarrassment in another liaison. We didn't even make it to the bed before the festivities took off. It was regretful afterwards, as the carpeting in the cabin gave something of a hellacious burn on the bare skin. We retired. We would arrive in the resort town late tomorrow morning. There, in that isolated forest chalet, I would find relief.
Let go.